What if, what if to achieve what you want required you to just make one simple change, one simple shift? And if you made this simple shift, it would change everything for you. I've been an avid personal development fan for many years. And one of the things that I've learned in this past 6 months has transformed the way that I look at personal development. It's transformed the way that I go about approaching my life. It's transformed the way that I go about looking at goals. And although there are areas which I don't yet have evidence that this is working, I can look back and look at other areas where this has worked. And I now recognize that this thing I'm going to talk to you about is really a recipe, in the sense that a recipe fundamentally, if it's a good recipe and it's, let's say you want to make a cake. Let's say you want to make a really good cake and you get a recipe, and because you've seen the picture of the recipe and it's in the book, that if you follow the recipe, you get the right ingredients, you mix the ingredients in the right order and sequence, that you are in fact going to get, you're going to get that cake, right? It may not look as good, but it's going to look pretty close. And basically what I'm going to talk to you about in this video is this concept of what we call identity shifting. And this is what's really fascinating about this topic, because I've been studying a lot and I've been watching various different YouTube people talking about it. I've been listening to the work of Neville Goddard, who is a really old school kind of manifestation teacher from the mid 1900s. Neville Goddard talks a lot about how to achieve what you want, you have to change your identity. You have to completely become a different person. Joe Dispenza references it in his book, which is called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And what's really interesting for me is, like a few years ago, I went on a Tony Robbins course, and Tony Robbins talks about how you need to raise your standards. And one of the things that I notice about myself is I found it really easy to raise my standards in some areas, but I found it really difficult to raise my standards in others. So for example, in my health, I found it quite easy to raise my standards, but in, let's say, business or finances, I found it really difficult. I found it harder. And through the study of this identity shifting research I've been doing, I've literally been watching hundreds of hours of videos and consuming content around identity. It is my firm belief that if there is an area of your life where you haven't achieved something, then there's a recipe. There's a recipe that you must follow to increase the probability of you achieving that thing. Now, surface level manifestation, surface level change in today's day and age talks a lot about habitual change, right? If you want to run a marathon, or if you want to get fit, you need to build the habit of running and actually build the habit of going to the gym, for example. Neville Goddard talks about it in a completely different way. Neville Goddard basically says that to achieve what you want is a recipe, but that the habitual change, like the habit bit, is the second step. Like, it's not actually the first step. Kind of like how I remember many years ago hearing like Tony Robbins talk about how he says reasons come first, answers come second. Meaning, if you want to achieve something, most people, what they do is they obsess about how. And Tony says what you need to obsess about is why. Like, what is the motive behind wanting to make that change? So that kind of links into this conversation in this video about identity. So when I loop back to what I was just saying a few minutes ago about finding it easy to follow through, be consistent in health, but maybe not so consistent in business and finance, when I look back on that, it's because I've had a very specific identity I've had a specific set of standards and rules around health that hasn't been the same recipe in, say, my mission or my finances. So what Neville Goddard ultimately says is, if there's an area of your life that you haven't yet achieved something and you want to accelerate the likelihood of you achieving it, you have to adopt a new identity for that area. So for example, let's say that you don't yet have the health that you want. In fact, let me give you a real example before we get into a pretend example. I was at the gym a few weeks ago and there was a guy there who said I can't remember how we got into it, but he said he just stopped smoking, or he's trying to stop smoking. And because of the stuff I've been listening to, I said to him, how about you say, are you up for trying something different around this smoking thing? Because he was I could tell he was open, like to just kind of talking about it. So, are you up for trying something different? He said, yeah, what do you mean? I said, how about you say, I'm not a smoker? He was like, that's good. He was like it was like a light bulb went off in his mind. Like he was like, that's really good. And then I explained to him, I said, look, I've been listening to this stuff around identity, and basically the only difference between a smoker and a non-smoker is the non-smoker has the identity that they're not a smoker. Whereas a smoker is trying to stop smoking when what they need to do is make a decision and identify and adopt a new identity that I am not a smoker. So if there's an area of your life that you want to work on, let's say your finances, you might want to start saying to yourself the affirmation of, I'm an incredibly financially literate person. I am really great with money. I am a financial whiz, and these things, kind of goes back to the old school Louise Hay of affirmations, helps you to more likely adopt the reality of being that type of person. Now, there is another layer to this because, affirmations I think are good, but I don't think they're not as impactful if you're in the wrong state. So another key thing is you've got to be making sure that you're in the right state. So when I do affirmations, I will invariably do them in state. So for me, I'll do them on a run or do them on the bike or do them in the gym, etc. And I think another thing that's really key with this is to think about who do you know, like intimately or at a distance, who already has the identity that you want to adopt. So like when I think about business, I'm constantly thinking of, for example, person I admire in my space is a guy called Brendon Burchard. I'm a big Brendon Burchard fan. So I sometimes think, how would Brendon Burchard show up? Like if Brendon Burchard owned my business, how would he show up? What would be his recipe? How would he go about his day? Right? And I think about that. And then what I do is I then will literally write down, what would be Brendon's recipe? If he was doing my business, what would his recipe be? And I just pretend like I know the answer. Because the beautiful thing about YouTube and books and the like is you probably can get a pretty good idea of what a person's recipe is by consuming their content and listening to their podcast and their audiobooks and all that kind of stuff, right? So another piece I think that's really important is to find someone who already has the identity that you want to model. And then I think the last piece, which is equally important, is to start spending time with people, ideally in person. And if you can't, then, just consuming their content is good. But ideally, you want to start spending time with people who already have that identity. So, for example, our friend the smoker that we just spoke about, if he starts spending time with people who are super healthy and identify with being non-smokers, for him to stay in rapport with that group, he will start to live the philosophy of, I'm not a smoker. If you want to be a certain health, if you've got a certain health goal that you want to achieve this year, then going to an environment where you can spend time with people who already have that health goal dialed in, like they live and breathe that, will be a really, really powerful step in the process of manifesting that reality. Yeah. So like I'm one of the things I'm doing at the moment is I'm spending time with a lot of really highly spiritual people. So I'm going to church on a Sunday. I'm in I have a very, very specific spiritual coach that is working with me on kind of inner child work and shadow work, because I've noticed that there is some significant unhealed trauma within me that's still in there. There's still, deep down, there's still some anger and resentment and the like, and emotions that I'm not proud of from childhood, seeking validation and approval, seeking from other people. It's still in there. So I'm doing a lot of work and spending time with people who don't have that, right? Who aren't that way wired. So there's a few things for you there, so for you to think about. So maybe the first step for you to think about is, who do you know that's already got this identity? What would their recipe be? And then think about, who you can perhaps spend time with who is kind of already living, breathing, embodying the kind of identity that you want to manifest for yourself. Because as the great Eckhart Tolle says, we're called human beings, but we live like we're human doings. And I actually believe that, it's my firm belief that for us to achieve our next level, whatever that looks like for you, will be more about the new version of you more than the achieving. Because as the cliche saying goes, what got you here won't get you there. What that means is that the level of thinking, the way that you show up, the habits, the rituals, the identity that has got you to this level will probably need to be a completely different identity for you to achieve your next level. Yeah. So really, really quite common sense stuff, but not necessarily common in practice. That's it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. As always, love to hear your thoughts. Comment, let me know your thoughts. What's resonated with you on this? What are your opinions on this? Is there an area in particular that you want to work on? What's the first step that you're going to take? Would love to hear from you. Love to hear how you get on with this identity shifting bit. I'm going through it right now. Going to church for me is about me becoming more spiritually aligned, trusting, having more faith, being around that type of person that is more open, more trusting, more faith-based. So let me know how you get on with this, because I would love to hear how this works for you. All right, that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. See you tomorrow. Take care. Goodbye.